the biggest shocker, of course, Brian Flores, the 40-year-old Miami Dolphins coach who went 24-25 in 3 seasons as the Dolphins head coach, was let go after going 10-6 in 2020 and 9-8 in 2021. Of course, they did not make the playoffs and have had just one playoff appearance since Stephen Ross bought the team back in 2009. Flores is the winningest coach in that time span. They're winning 49% of his games and going. The Dolphins have had since 2002 7, so that's 20 years, 7 winning seasons, 7 seasons above 500, not 500, but above 500. Brian Flores was the architect of 2 of those, and they came in the most recent years. This is the first back-to-back winning seasons since 2002 and 2003, I believe, for the Dolphins. And it was, let me confirm that. Yep, since 2002, 2003. Just to let you know how longer that was, Dave Wannstedt and Ricky Williams were like the key figures in the Dolphins back in 2002.
What were the like Jay Fiedler, maybe?
That sounds, Jay Fiedler. That's correct.
There we go.
Was he? Oh yeah. What's up, Deebo? How you doing, buddy?
I'm great. I'm sure you had a fantastic intro and are talking about the biggest surprise of the morning by far, right?
Brian Flores, of course. Also, Brian Flores, this is the biggest start. Like, I guess I wasn't that surprised that they were going to fire him in the sense that it felt, when they were 1-7, I think they were 1-7. They lost 7 straight games. First team to ever lose 7 straight games and then win 7 straight games in NFL history. Certainly the first team to ever lose 7 straight, win 7 straight, and then fire their head coach. Brian Flores, this is the biggest shocker to me. Not that he was fired. It felt like in the middle of that losing streak that he might get fired. 2 weeks ago, he was a coach of the year candidate. And not only did he sweep Bill Belichick and the Patriots this year, he went 4-2 in 3 years against the Patriots. Like, that's the whole job, man. You come to South Beach, you go to the Jets, you go to the Bills. You just got to beat the Patriots. And I get that Tom Brady wasn't there for 2 of those years, but what more could you possibly want from the Dolphins? Now, maybe this is smoke and mirrors. I call them frauds all along because they were beating up on bad teams. Yeah, and that's okay. They ended up being, they weren't a playoff caliber team. They took a little bit of a step back in terms of their win total. They took a little bit of a step back from that 10-win season last year. That was probably going to happen no matter what. So I think 2 things have to be, it has to be one of 2 things here, Deebo. And I'm curious what you think is more likely. One, that Jim Harbaugh is in Stephen Ross's back pocket. And that seems less likely now that he commented and said he won't be the guy to hire him away from Michigan. So throw that theory out the window, I guess, which means it's the only other thing that's possible is that there is a power struggle between GM Chris Grier, who is not being fired, and Brian Flores, who is fired. And that Stephen Ross, as many naive billionaires who run football teams often find themselves, basically got hoodwinked by the GM who he spends more time talking to than the head coach. And there is a belief, I think, around the league that Flores was not a huge fan of Tua Tagovailoa. Grier was, key in drafting him. And so you're probably going to see a focus on finding a coach who is very intrigued by Tua, which, I guess good luck. Since with the Harbaugh, don't you think that's the only possible explanation for this?
I think you narrowed it down. Yeah, there was all the speculation for the past couple of weeks that it would be a Harbaugh thing. And I just want to bring up, it's great when we hear from reporters, but I always kind of put added weight to former players that are in the media now that say something along those lines. And I just want to show Darius Butler, former player in the media, man-to-man pod, has these types of connections. And when someone like that, like when our guy BMAC says something attached to someone in the league, I tend to trust it because they're very close to
there's no agenda there.
Right.
Darius Butler's not being fed information by Chris Grier.
No, there's not this source guessing that we sometimes might do with others. We're not having that agenda here. So it says, for those listening on the podcast, according to my sources in Miami, there was tension all year between GM Grier and head coach Flores. GM Chris Grier had been a part of the Dolphins organization for more than 20 years. One or both had to go. Now, others reporting this as well, but when it comes from a place like this, tend to believe it. And you're right. From coach of the year candidate, we were talking about him 60-1. Did you get that bet in, Will?
I did not. I did not bet on
Well,
Brian Flores.
wise.
Yeah, I'm pretty glad. Yeah,
Probably. What were the odds last night that we would have had him to be fired this morning? 20-1. It wasn't 60-1, but still super unlikely. One of the more unlikely Black Monday firings I can remember on Monday in the past couple of years.
I would say it's extremely unlikely firing. If you told me that a head coach in his third year had a winning record, went to any AFC East team other than the Patriots, and had a winning record in 2 of 3 years, but didn't make the playoffs. It's okay. Look, I mean, 10-6, 9-8. Had a young quarterback who was starting to show some promise, and had swept Bill Belichick and went 4-2 against Belichick. I would expect that he would be getting a contract extension, not that he would be fired. The Darius Butler thing, like I said, and I hadn't even seen that tweet. I agree with you. Like, that's seeing that from a former player who's in the media but still talks to a lot of these players. Like if you're 2 or 3 years removed from the league, which I think Darius Butler is, I mean, you got a lot of friends around the league. Like you know people in organizations, and a lot of those dudes you played with end up going, to go on to coach. Like, so like it's that information is probably pretty accurate, is what I'm saying, and I agree with you.
And ultimately, I think it comes down when you just look at the owner, and we talk about Stephen Ross becoming the majority owner in 2009, one playoff appearance since then. That's all it is. If there was one playoff appearance in the past 3 years for Brian Flores, he's put up a decent record, one game below 500, but one playoff appearance, even if it was in year 1 or year 2 and not this year, I think that changes things. But these owners get greedy, and rightfully so, but they don't like that stat of one playoff appearance in the past 12 seasons, just 2 playoff appearances for the franchise in the past 20 years. That's the difference here.
Hey, toss that Butler tweet up again, because I want to point something out, if you don't mind.
I am doing that now.
So in his tweet, he noted that Chris Greer, you don't have to do it if you don't want to. Oh yeah, Chris Greer, the second part of it. GM Chris Greer has been part of the Dolphins organization for more than 20 years. So Stephen Ross bought the Dolphins in 2009. Do you think that you should keep, here's my thing. Should you keep the guy who's new and winning, or keep the guy who's been in the crappy organization for a really long time? I mean, why? Maybe Stephen Ross needs to look internally, because it's probably more likely that this team and this franchise can't win. You look around at all these franchises that stink, and there is a common theme. Ownership doesn't know what it's doing. Like, look at we talk about the Lions and the Bears and the Dolphins. It's like these owners bring in these people, these people who are very good office politicians. And there's a belief too. You can take it down if you want. There's a belief too that Brian Flores sort of, not that he rocked the boat, just that he's probably not very good in an office setting. And that's not what a head coach is supposed to do. Like a head coach is supposed to win football games. You're not supposed to be an office politician.
He's not a schmoozer like Will Brinson, we could say.
I turned down my volume on my dunk button. I actually think I'm kind of bad at office politics too. I'm a schmoozer, don't get me wrong, but I just stuff will come out of my mouth that is not sometimes.
Fair enough. Well, in that tweet, Butler said, one or both had to go. It could have been both. It seems like Flores was going to be the decision, but then Greer's the one making this decision to remove him, and his job maybe not in jeopardy at all.
Here's something else. Owner Stephen Ross states he has, quote, no plans to pursue Deshaun Watson. So no Deshaun Watson, no Jim Harbaugh. If you're a Dolphins fan,
it's a bad morning.
Yeah. You wake up thinking, okay,
beat the Patriots. Fell short of the playoffs, but ended the season on a high note.
Won in week 18, you beat the Patriots, and you finished with 9 wins. Sure, some of them against bad teams, and it wasn't a great season, but we're this close to the playoffs. Next year, to his 3rd season, maybe we can finally take this big step forward. And now you're quasi rebooting. It doesn't make much sense.
And William Hill, their over under preseason for the Dolphins was 9 wins. So in that sense, you met expectations. You fell short of the playoffs. I think 9-8 even with 7 teams, you don't expect to get into the playoffs, but they were right on par with, I think, what people expected. Now, fans probably expected a little bit more of a leap in year 2 from Tua, but we saw glimpses of that. But now no Desean, no Harbaugh, no Brian Flores. Who do they look after? I think it's clear when we talk about some of these other positions that Flores is immediately a head coach candidate for
Absolutely
these other vacancies. He will get brought up. He will get interviewed. He probably will get hired by one of these teams. But who is on your short list for the Dolphins?
I would say that it's tough, man, because if I'm a head coaching candidate with, like, let's say that I'm Doug Peterson. And I don't think that Doug Peterson is the top head coaching candidate, but Doug Peterson is number one. It might be for some people. He has a Super Bowl ring. He has a good resume. He did the Mike McCarthy thing where he takes a year off and we'll have some sort of off, at some point in the next few days, like a Doug Peterson looked deep inside his soul this offseason and realized it was all Howie Roseman's fault. And then he spent the weekend at PFF. No, I'm just kidding.
And that his quarterback might have been unsalvageable.
Wentz? Yeah. He made Wentz look like an MVP candidate in 2017. Like that's
Doug probably a winner yesterday.
Doug definitely a winner yesterday. So if you're gonna fire Flores, look, I always point out the ex-girlfriend theory that I hold for coaching hires. Is that when you fire a guy, you're probably going to look towards the opposite. Like when you break up with somebody, you break up with a tall blonde, maybe sometimes, a tall, anyway, I don't need to describe breakups. You get we
get it.
You go in the opposite direction a lot of times. You fire a defensive-minded Belichick tree guy, you're probably not going back to the Belichick tree, and you're probably going on offense. So I think Josh McDaniels is probably out. And I don't think McDaniels would do the stupid thing of going to coach directly against Bill Belichick. Just don't do that. Nick Saban learned the hard way. Brian Daboll in the division as well, it would be a little surprising. And anybody who coached for Bill Belichick probably shouldn't take this job. I think you're looking at somebody who is not a first-timer, an offensive-minded guy, or a potential splash name. Like I think Kellen Moore and Doug Peterson would be the first two guys that come to mind. Nathaniel Hackett is interviewing with the Jaguars. He's the Packers offensive coordinator. I mean, look, man, you got Aaron Rodgers, so it's a little bit easier, but when you're working with him, it's certainly going to get you some interviews, and he's been around the block for a little while. I guess they could look to college for either that wouldn't be surprising if they looked to college for a non Jim Harbaugh.
So I'm laughing because I read an article that, knowing that Harbaugh probably out, that suggested Ryan Day, which would just be funny.
Is that I saw that article a few minutes ago just because I was making sure I had all my bases covered for these candidates. Was that on Sportsnaut or whatever that was.com?
It might have been. It was from like a month ago when it seems
Joe Brady was the first one.
Right. That's the same list. So Ryan, it would just be funny if Ross doesn't go with a Michigan grad, but kind of harms his college alma mater rival and pulls Ryan Day from Ohio State.
That's what I would do if I was a billionaire NFL owner. I would hire like Mac Brown from Carolina and then fire him immediately. Wait till Carolina. I'm just kidding. Bill O'Brien was suggested in the chat. Southern Dandy said better not be Bill O'Brien. Again, I really don't think Bill O'Brien definitely would like another head coaching job, but he's with Saban in Alabama right now, and he was with Belichick before.
How far do you have to be removed from the Belichick tree to be clean?
I don't think you can have ever worked for Belichick and take the Dolphins job with and not have Belichick see it as, oh, okay.
Yeah, you can't even have been like a quality control assistant for 1 year in 2005. You're out.
Is that Doug Peterson?
No, I don't think so.
It was. You're just throwing that.
Yeah, just a random. I don't know who that fits. But
so Joe Judge out of the Dolphins job is what you're saying. He's not out of the Giants job yet, but like guys like Patrick Graham or Todd Bowles, defensive coordinators who, despite the Giants being bad, are certainly Dennis Allen with the Saints. I just don't know if the Dolphins will go in the defensive direction given that Flores and Greer, had these issues, and that you don't necessarily, if you have Tua and you believe Tua needs to be developed, it makes it difficult, I think, to go in the defensive direction as a selling point to your owner. Like, I would guess that, Greer has told Stephen Ross that, Flores hates Tua. He doesn't know how to develop a quarterback. This guy, if it weren't for my players, this guy, we would have lost the locker room a long time ago, yada, yada, yada. I think focus on offensive people, focus on offensive minds. Eric Bieniemy is somebody that could work out.
Leftwich
for sure. Yep.
And when we look at Stephen Ross's head coaching hires, starting with Tony Sparano to Joe Philbin to Adam Gase, all those guys with offensive backgrounds, and then breaking the mold for Brian Flores. And I remember the conversations in 2019 we had with Brady Quinn when that was the Cliff Kingsbury, Zach Taylor, Matt LaFleur year, where the Dolphins kind of broke the mold that year by not going the friend of Sean McVay, offensive genius protege route.
That's
and
right.
It was Flores and Fangio that year that kind of broke that mold. But 3 of Stephen Ross's 4 head coaching hires have been from the offensive side of the ball. So you think they go back there?
They had Dan Campbell in the house, and they let him go. They let Man Campbell go. Went 5-7 after Joe Philbin was fired midseason. Man, they have really had some interim coaches since Ross got there. So they fired Sparano midseason in 2011. Todd Bowles took over as interim, went 2-1. Hired Joe Philbin. They had Todd Bowles and Dan Campbell just right there. They're bad at this. I see that, and that the fact that they are bad at this, and it's kind of an attractive job, although the division is really, really hard. Like, the Pats are still there. The Bills are look like they're going to be good for quite some time. And I mean, the Jets are at least potentially functional.
Two free spots.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. And then the fact that you got to go, you have 3 years and you have to make the playoffs, and that's not unusual for NFL coaching jobs, but you got to go better. I don't know. How do you do better than what Brian Flores did in Miami, given where this team has been for the last 25, 30 years? It's very surprising.
And I'll bring it up again. They did give up their first round pick to the Eagles, so they don't have that, which turned into 15 overall, but they do have the 22nd overall pick from the 49ers.
Well, currently this 22nd. If my Niners, right. Currently 22nd. If the Niners go on a playoff run, that could be in theory,
turn into 30.
32, even, Deebo. Wouldn't that be? That would be exciting for my wallet. The Dolphins, by the way, were dead last in scoring defense in 2019, 6th in 2020, and 16th in 2021. So the defense dramatically improved. Fell back a little bit this year, but that was probably always going to happen. I definitely have questions about what the Dolphins are doing, and Dolphins fans should have questions as well.